Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Water Cooler Conversations. My name is Mohammed Mahmoud. I am the Chief Executive Officer at the Climate and Water Initiative. And today's episode, we're joined by a good friend and guest, Jamila and Mir, who wears many hats, multiple hats all the time. So, as far as I know, latest and greatest is you're currently an inside lead with Wave, but also a strategy advisor with the Dubai Environment and Climate Change Authority. And I'm sure as we chat further today, you'll tell us all the other things that you're doing and continue to do. So, welcome to the show, Jamila.
Thanks, Muhammad. Lovely to be with you.
Awesome. Well, I like to start off with just sort of setting the stage in our conversation, and this is water cooler conversation, so it's as casual as can be as we talk about technical things and non-technical things. But I'm trying to actually remember where we originally crossed paths, and my memory is not as good as it used to be. So I'm gonna lean on you to maybe remind me where we first intersected, unless unless your memory is also not as great as mine.
I don't know why I have a suspicion it might be through Karim Al-Jandi, who would have connected us,
You
if I'm
know,
not mistaken,
I think you're probably right.
right?
I think you're probably right
Okay.
because you guys had worked together on some, as far as I know, research projects or papers. Is that correct?
Yeah, me and Karim have kind of intersected in different ways for nearly 10 years. We met by coincidence, and then we worked for the same company at some point. Then we did a mini research project together. Yeah, but I think he's the one who connected us.
I think you're right. And of course, Kareem at the time was working with me when I was at the Middle East Institute and the climate and water program, and he was one of the scholars there. So we'll get him on the show at some point. But yeah, it's I think you're right. And then of course, I think from there the floodgates open in terms of how many mutual people that we actually knew and all that. And of course, from that point onwards, I think we interfaced at multiple meetings, and you also graciously joined several of my events when I was at the Middle East Institute, and so I do appreciate that. So I I want to start maybe with reflecting on your experience and expertise. And from my perspective, and feel free to correct me, you've gone through several evolutions, right? So you
Yeah.
have experience in the environmental space, environmental issues. You've then evolved and maybe connected to that sustainability, started going to the climate change space. There's urban planning in there. I think more recently, you're looking at issues related to oceans. Help me connect these dots. I mean, this is you're doing a lot. So, how did that evolution begin? Where did you start? Where did you end? How do you tie these things together in terms of the work that you have done and the work that you're currently doing? It's a broad question, sorry, but just
Thanks. Yeah, it is quite broad. So maybe I'll start from the beginning. So my studies, I studied environmental health, right, which is understanding how the natural and built environment impacts human health. And yeah, basically, most of my studies are in the environmental space. Graduated during the crisis, 2008.
Mm.
The job I got was on a construction site.
Oh wow.
So then, yeah, I started on a construction site. And there, I think that's where the dual journey of environment and sustainability started because I was working on two aspects, the construction environmental management plan of the project, and then also LEED certification, which is green green buildings, right?
Mhm.
And it really kind of grew from there. That was the first full-time job in corporate I had. From there, I remained in private sector for around 12, 13 years, always having this dual role of looking at environment and then also sustainability, which means basically looking at environmental impact assessments on the environmental side and then working on sustainability strategies for different types of developments, anything from a building to a infrastructure plan, city plan. So it kind of grew on me naturally, and honestly, I've been lucky to just get different projects exposure that helped me grow in these two. So I'm not a specialist in any topic basically,
Right.
but know quite a bit on a general level across the two hats. Um, and then I moved to a to policy role, where I also looked at the same portfolio items, right? Environment, natural environment, and then also urban resources. I'd say water, air quality, wastewater, waste. And then naturally, obviously, by that time, I think around 2015,
Mm.
so I got the policy role at around 2019, but around 2015, climate ha had become a very prominent topic that was no longer forgotten, right?
Mm.
And so climate change slowly started becoming a recurring topic and point within these two buckets, right? Environment and sustainability. And so that's, I think, where climate change started becoming very, very prominent in kind of the work I was doing. Um, and then I was very privileged to have the opportunity to work on COP28 for 2 years, which obviously was very focused on climate.
Yeah, we're
Um,
gonna dive on that deep. So
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
sorry, I'm
No, no, this
rambling,
is
but
good. This is good.
yeah. And then during that time, I got an opportunity to work on oceans
Mm.
with Wave. So yeah, that's how slowly and the connection obviously, I mean when you work when you and you know this better than anyone, and I think there isn't any topic other better than water to highlight how everything's connected, right?
Mm.
So when you understand how the land ecosystems are connected with the coastline, by default you start understanding a bit the ocean. I'm not diminishing the importance of people who've spent all their life on one topic, and I'm by no means a specialist on anything, but you start understanding the connectivity. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you said it best, and I don't think it's a slight in any way to, as you said, not necessarily a specialist, maybe a sort of a jack of all trades. I know that historically is viewed in a negative sense, but I don't think that's the case here because you've been able to sort of be involved in different areas that are relevant to the larger objective in terms of environmental issues, sustainability issues, issues in terms of the health of the planet, to put it so bluntly. And
Yeah, good point. Like good term, I think. Perfect term.
okay, good, 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 good.
Yeah.
But I want to unpack some of these things, and you're one of also just a side note, obviously we did some research before we talked. As much as I know you, there's still some things we had to look into. You're one of the few people that I know that has the uh, besides your bachelor's and other certifications, two masters, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
And that's and but also still very strongly linked to the environmental side. I want to unpack something about what you just said earlier, your transition into a couple of those areas. I know that as you described it, first on the construction side, a lot of the work seemed more on the regulatory and compliance side, if I may say so. And and then you made that pivot. So not the topics, but you made that pivot into more of a policy strategy side. How was that transition for you? I mean, that's a very different mindset, right? Whereas in the regulatory compliance sense, you are given the boundaries of your work and the things that you need to adhere to, versus now shifting to a strategy and policy sense where it's almost boundless, right? And so you're looking a little bit more widely without constraints. How was that pivot for you? Was there an adjustment period? Was there?
I love the question. I love the research part that you've done. Um, أولا for sure, honestly, I say alhamdulillah as we say in Arabic. It's all, a lot of it is luck, right? Because I think if I hadn't gotten these opportunities, I wouldn't have had that shift. But part of it was also indirectly me driving myself away from what I didn't want. Very early on the construction site, I realized that it as you said, I was given something and I wasn't really helping in any change in the decision making. I was helping with the compliance of something that was decided by somebody else somewhere else, right? And because everything that's on a construction site is already designed, and then you only, mainly the engineers would be the ones arguing for any change. And I'm not an engineer. I can't argue why anything should be designed differently or implemented differently. And so very quickly, I just realized I didn't want to stay in that environment because I had zero ambition, growing in the construction field and managing construction projects, even if that was in sustainability. Um, and so I realized early on that with my background, if you want, if I wanted to have a role in where things were decided, I had to go a bit upstream in the project. So then I moved to consultancy, and every time I moved again, and honestly, I tell this to a lot of people who are younger than me. I'm like, I've spent sometimes 2 years in a job trying to get out of that job,
Oh,
right? Like just applying tens of CVs every month and go through ups and downs where
yeah,
I'm like really excited to leave and I'm very active in searching, and then other times I get busy. So for my first job on the construction site, I remember I started on the December and January, I started applying elsewhere. And then it took 2 years to find the right job. So anyway,
yeah,
I think a lot of dedication as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The other thing that I think really helped was me trying on the side to understand what I really wanted. I think when you're new to the market, it's very hard to understand what the opportunities are. So I took a lot of certifications and extra classes, etc., just to start understanding what where what would be more exciting. And so I think that helped a lot also land me the next job and talk about it, seem like I'm competent enough to take on that new role. And luck, alhamdulillah. So yeah,
Yeah.
these I think
Yeah,
things, yeah.
it's true. I mean, as much as, I think when you're younger, not everyone, but a lot of young people have this sort of vision of how their career will unfold, right? And some more stringent in terms of that outlook. But the reality is once you start working, and certainly when you get, older and much deeper in your career, where you end up sometimes is very different than where you started in terms of maybe even what you went to school or what you studied technically, right? And to your point, that's a mix of, I think, just opportunity, right? Whether it's luck, whether it's opportunity, whether it's circumstance. And sometimes it's certainly earlier in your career and in other instances, you sort of take the job you get, right? You take the job that's available and, maybe eventually try to pivot to something else. But that something else also depends on it being available and lining with your interests. So I think that's probably as natural and organic a path as most people will follow.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Now I know that most of your, well, I'm gonna almost say, I don't want to use definitive terms because you'll correct me otherwise, but almost all of your work is focused on the Middle East region. Would that be
Yeah.
accurate?
But, yeah, I think I had some stints outside, but most of it, yes. Like let's say 90%,
90%,
85. Yeah.
which is the part that I'm familiar with. But out of curiosity, where did you dip your toes outside of the region and what kind of work were you doing?
Um, I was lucky. So it's really funny because I've always actually wanted to work in the humanitarian and development field. So I did a project. It wasn't very long, but in Ethiopia, a friend of mine when I was in Arab leads a lot of kind of uh, projects where Arab acts as a third-party reviewer for development projects. So we had a project in Ethiopia, mini project in Nepal. Um, Anything else? A bit in Australia, kind of
Oh, wow.
4 or 5 months. Yeah, because I for personal reasons, sometimes I had to do some stints there. So yeah, but most of my work has been in the MENA region. Yeah.
And the organization you said Arab, what is that an acronym
Yes.
for something?
No, no, it's a company. It's a consulting, engineering consulting firm, ARUP.
ARUP. Okay, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I heard Arab. I was like,
No, 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 no,
is
no,
that a
no,
person?
no, no.
Um, okay, we got to talk about the big. You've done many interesting things in your career and had many different roles, but I think the big one in terms of where a lot of people that didn't know you got to know you or were
Mhm.
trying to know you was when you were senior advisor with the high-level climate champion during the UAE's COP28 presidency. Um, and I want to ask you a little bit more about that, but I just want to share just an example of I think how busy you were during that time in high demand, right? It's a very prominent sort of role, not just your role, but the climate champion during that period under presidency around COP28 in the UAE. And I remember there was a point when we had both attended. I think it was MENA Climate Week when it was in Riyadh right around that time. And all I remember was just seeing you running around from one venue to another. And I literally did not have time to speak with you. And I think the only time we actually got to catch up was on the plane leaving Riyadh back to Dubai. So I knew that you were under a lot of pressure and demand, and you know everyone wants to talk to you when you're sort of connected to the conference. But talk to me a little bit about that period. You know how the role came to you. I know we've talked about it in the past, but then what were the responsibilities and how was it during that time frame? I can imagine just you know immense demand on your time and a lot and being pulled in different directions.
Yeah, I think everybody who was in that boat was working very, very, very hard. And I think yeah, how I got the role again by pure luck and chance. Alhamdulillah, there's a friend of mine called Tanzid Alam. I
Yes,
think
I
you
know
know
Tanzania.
Tanzid,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
who was made aware that there was an opportunity for the incoming high level champion appointed by the UAE, Her Excellency Razan Barak, and asked if I would be interested. And I said, yeah, why not? I had no idea what a high level champion was. But I knew of Razan and of her work ever since I had moved to the UAE, and I think everybody working in the environment space has a lot of respect. And she's an amazing individual and leader, really. So I said yes, and Alhamdulillah, it worked out. What the role was, I think, not only for my role, I think everybody who worked on COP28 and everybody who worked on any COP does everything that needs to be done. I was mainly kind of the UAE and MENA focal point for the high level champion work for COP28. Took a bit of time to really understand what that meant. So the first period was really just, and because I've been here for so long, I've been in the UAE since 2008. So just talking to the people in the environment sustainability space about what their ambitions are, what could be done for COP28, me understanding what could be for COP28, and really you just become a connector um, or a messenger, as in, okay, this is something they're asking about. How can they get involved? And then you go ask the presidency. So there was a lot of just talking. Talking and coordinating and listening and sharing ideas and shutting down doors when, ideas wouldn't go forward, when partnerships couldn't materialize, trying to find other partners. So really it was a lot of that. It was a lot of that. There is a huge team called the Climate Champions team that exists to deliver against the high-level champion portfolio. I have a very good friend of mine who was kind of leading that coordination. And then slowly with time, we started having focus areas. And because of our backgrounds, um, she was leading kind of the entire interface with the UN and the interface with the presidency because she had a background in diplomacy. Her name is Hannah Beswick, and I have a lot of respect with her. And she also has background in women and indigenous peoples. And because of my background, I started looking slowly at the built environment, energy portfolio, cities, and coordinating with the leads. Um, yeah, I could go on. The core team was amazing. We were so lucky that under Her Excellency, we were a very small team, kind of the private office, but a very loving and happy team. We always made fun because our chief of staff, who's Her Excellency's chief of staff, always said, like, we're not probably not the most well rested, but always the one smiling, like always the team that's smiling the most. So it was a really good experience, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And it's really helpful to talk through this because I don't think a lot of people appreciate or maybe even fully understand, right, the role of the climate champion and then what happens as part of that contingent, right? Because when you think about the COP process, you have the COP president, right? Then you have the youth champion, there's this contingent, right, that's attached. Um, and each of them sort of lead different aspects of the engagement for the host nation. And I think it's helpful to talk through that, just so just as you put it out, so people can understand what are the responsibilities, what are the roles, how does that one particular faction, if you will, support the COP machine, right? When it's
Yeah,
hosted by a certain country.
sure. So there's two buckets, I think, two kind of teams. You have the presidency team that sit directly under the president, and both the president and the UN high-level champion are appointed by the host country, and
Mm,
their role is two-year role, incoming year, outgoing year, so that there's a handover process.
mm,
Um, and the presidency team, I think, has it the hardest because they are responsible for the logistics, the hosting, every little detail of the event is really their responsibility, in addition to the programming, in addition to the negotiators, which is you kind of have a Chinese wall between like the negotiators. I don't mean it in a bad way, but I mean they're very two distinct
mm,
aspects, right? The negotiators who talk to the country appointed negotiators, and this is kind of closed doors. And then you have the what they call the action agenda,
mm,
which is really everything that happens outside of negotiations, which is usually in a voluntary basis or a voluntary commitments, even if it becomes commitments that corporates come up with and say, this is what we will do. It
mm,
doesn't sit within kind of the legally mandatory space that the negotiations operate in.
mm,
And this is where we act. The climate champions team, the UN high level champion. The background to the UN high level champion role is because in Paris, and it was born before. The idea was born before Paris, but was voted in during Paris.
mm,
The realization that having one senior political representative driving COPs but focused on negotiation is not enough because you have all of the private sector, NGOs, academia, subnationals that also need attention but are usually not encompassed within the negotiation space. So they created the high-level champion role to be responsible for what they call now the action agenda. And then really around COP26, COP25, COP26, the Climate Champions team was born as this support engine to help the climate champion, the UN high-level champion, deliver on their role because one individual can't
right.
talk to the entire world. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you've been sort of behind the curtain in terms of the cop machine, what's an example, or maybe there's more than one example, some things that you surprised you in terms of how certain things maybe work behind the scene that you weren't privy to, even as someone who's attended, previous COPs and have participated sort of in global climate, meetings and engagements. What's something that surprised you being behind the curtain as opposed to in front of it?
Um, there weren't two things. I think the amount of work that goes into it from everyone, not only the host, but every the NGOs that are involved in this every year, and the stakeholders involved, really, there's a lot going in from everyone. So the level of effort that of everyone involved is crazy. Um, but also the importance of um, so inclusion is a very tricky topic, right?
Mm,
Because sometimes you have trade-offs between inclusion and efficiency. And so there's a huge amount of discussions and dialogues that sometimes don't lead to anything, but the process itself is important. And so that was new to me. I think that's probably core to the diplomatic world, which I'm not part of.
mm.
I'm a very direct and blunt person, and I learned to understand and appreciate why that is, right. And it takes a lot of patience, a lot of outreach and connectivity, a lot of empathy as well, right, to understand where are the common points between people or stakeholders who, at face value, don't have anything in common, right? Like putting them on the same table. You know when when you have your invite list, we're not going to reach any outcome by putting this discussion together. But these intangible benefits, I guess, is something that I learned during the process.
It's interesting. You're right. I think I've picked up on this same thing as well, not just in COP, but sometimes in some of these larger global or regional meetings, right, where visibility is a huge component for multiple people, right? So there's part of it that is contingent on the outcome, right? And certainly in the COP process, there is, right? There is always at every COP, there's some type of something comes out of it, right? That is a landmark thing that most of the time connected to the host nation, right? Because it's almost a signal of success, right? That in our COP, we did X, Y, and Z, right? And certainly the one UAE, there was things coming out every day, in terms of agreements and successes. But to your point, because it's such a huge event and other similar events or gatherings or convenings, there's this component of people wanting to participate. Your point about inclusion, right? Which is for them, the process is more important than the outcome, right? And the process involves, for some, I've said this in previous conversations where for some people, they just want to be there to be seen, right?
Mm,
To check a box, I'm there, take a photo op, for whatever reason, right? And we can argue that's probably not helpful in the grand scheme of things. It's not adding value to either achieving the outcome or achieving inclusion in terms of adding more seats to the table, right? Which is the other piece to your point that you said it earlier, sometimes closing doors as opposed to opening doors, where some engagements aren't useful in terms
yep,
of getting to an outcome, but they are a necessary part of the machine in terms of making sure that having people included, because then the criticism
yep,
against not including people can be absolutely damaging to the outcome-oriented part. Would you
yep.
agree?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And the only thing I would add is that it's not only during COP, it's the entire year leading to COP, right? Because parties are engaged throughout that process. And usually you have these milestone moments and these touch points throughout the year in the hope of coming either to an agreement, to a conclusion by in time for COP, or at least having ensured proper inclusion
Mhm.
in the time for COP. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I do remember even during that period, as I said, I know you were so slammed and busy, just, just running from one place to the other, people, requesting your time. And I do remember at some points people reaching out to me, knowing that I'm connected to you, trying to
Really?
facilitate an introduction, right? And so, you kind of have to be cognizant of the fact that, some outreach is useful, but again, sometimes it's just people trying to attach themselves to the shiny object. Uh,
No, I mean, honestly, if I were from the outside, I probably would have done the same. I think the problem is it's always a challenge. As soon as you know where the cup is going to be, people start getting excited and want to have answers. And nobody has answers from day one. And usually it takes a lot of time to know what the program is. Even small things, how do you participate in the green zone? When is registration going to open? So and it becomes frustrating if this information is not available on the website. These are I used to joke. I'm like, the year where COP28 was hosted, my mornings were coffees with people I knew from the UAE who wanted to know more, and then kind of our region would wake up and I'd start having meetings online, and then Europe would wake up, and then the US and Latin America would wake up, right? And then keep having meetings all day long. But I completely understand, why people were reaching out. Yeah, I the thing that I have no answer for is how can it be done better? This is what I have no answer for.
yeah. It's tough. It's tough. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big wieldy thing, and it takes a lot of people and effort to keep this thing moving, right? To land a cop. I mean, not just in terms of receiving it, but to have a successful meeting, just to run it, period, as a baseline is a monster, let alone
Yeah.
to make sure that something tangible or successful comes out of it is even an added burden. So yeah, I completely
Yeah, I
empathize.
do also have to give credit. There's a team dedicated in the UNFCCC Secretariat who kind of are the oil to this entire engine. And I don't know how they do that every single year, really. But they are kind of hidden soldiers that year on year, hold hands of the incoming presidency, make sure the outgoing presidency, is well taken care of. So it's there are people really who spend so much time. I mean, yeah, it was a crazy 2 years, but there are some people who spend their entire life doing that. Chapeau bas. I don't know how they do it.
It's incredible. I mean, burnout could be a real thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and after COP28, I think I had 2 months of not wanting to speak to anyone. And then the first time I went to a panel after that, I had kind of uh, how do you say it in English? Like when your heart beats quickly because
Anxiety
you're,
attack, maybe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
That's understandable. So I think we've beaten the cop horse to death. So I want to talk about a couple of other things that you were involved in. Let's talk about your sort of urban planning, urban sustainability side, right? So we talked about the environmental piece where you started. We kind of jumped a little bit ahead on the climate change, the COP thing, just to get the elephant out of the room. But when I first met you, that's how I knew you, right? In terms of the work that you were doing in urban sustainability. What was some of not necessarily the projects, but the kind of work that you were doing and how it may be linked with some of these other aspects, whether it's environmental, subsequently later climate, and all that. What was the thread there in terms of the type of work you're doing related to urban planning, and what kind of work were you doing?
sure. Again, the two work streams that I've always been involved in when I was in corporate were environment. And on environment, it was a lot of the work I did was a lot of um, compiling the environmental impact assessments, delivering the environmental impact assessments for projects that the companies I worked for had to deliver, right? So we take, for example, the scope to do the environmental impact assessment and the sustainability strategy for a master plan, let's say, or an infrastructure project, or a strategic development project, for example. We worked on the Abu Dhabi Capital Integrated Transport planning project, right?
Mm.
Or different long-term urban plans in the UAE or mega projects in the region. Typically, the environmental impact assessment is a very kind of established process. And so again, there my role was mainly bringing the different pieces together, reviewing before we submit to the authorities for approval. Um, Sustainability strategies, most of the time, I think 2008 to 2010, 12, you have a lot of clients who were interested in having LEED certification, BREEAM certification because they wanted the credibility of this external kind of international certification. Slowly, around the mid 2010s, clients started feeling comfortable having a bespoke sustainability strategy for their project, not necessarily requiring LEED or requiring both. LEED as a plus, but also quite curious to know what are my project's kind of bespoke sustainability targets. And this is what we used to do. And I was very lucky in Arab around the time I joined. Um, the planning component started also becoming very strong. So I'm not an urban planner, but the way the team worked is that they had transport planners, infrastructure engineers and planners, urban planners work together with the sustainability team. So we were really an integrated team working to deliver, let's say, the master plan, the concept and detailed master plans. And so that taught me a lot. There was a lot of negotiations, like pushing the boundary, asking questions, could this be done? How can we do this together? And I think that shaped my understanding of integrated planning. Started with Bir Happold, but really kind of strengthened with Arab, where the planning component grew while I was there. Um, so yeah, that's in a nutshell. On the city plans, which
Mm.
were either 2030 or 2040. The environmental component took a different shape than just compliance, right? Looking at the natural assets within the city or the state, we were planning what were the threats, what were the opportunities to either conserve or enhance, restore the environmental ecosystems. So
This
that's
was
kind
this
of
was with your time in Dubai specifically?
um, so I did a bit in Abu Dhabi, a bit in Doha, some projects in Saudi. Urban plans that I worked on were mainly UAE. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And now you find yourself working on oceans.
Yes.
That of all the things, right? Environmental makes
I
sense.
know, and I'm afraid of the ocean, but don't tell anyone.
Well, it's too late. This is everyone's watching, so your phobia is now public. Um,
Yeah, ilahi.
but, but everything you've done, there is a thread, right? Of obviously the environmental compliance, the urban planning, the environmental impact assessment, that makes sense. The climate change aspect that bleeds into everything. Oceans.
Mm.
Oh, how did we land here? And what are your objectives in this space dealing with oceans?
Um, so while I was still with the COP28, an old colleague, I call her my big sister. She was actually my boss when I was with Bira Happold. Had a role with. She was the general manager for the NGO that I now work for, um, who has like great leadership. And I reached out and said, if you are looking for anyone to work on, policy, let me know. Because I mean, the COP28 role is a finite role, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't have visibility back then what would be next. And so then she reached out and said, yeah, we're looking for someone to work on data and insights. I said, okay, data and insights. I'm good with numbers, but what does that actually mean? And so I understood a bit more about what they're trying to do. The mission is really ambitious. It's really great. And I said yes. Why not, right? I think the team there again. I think team culture is very important, like this common understanding of what you're here to do, how are we going to deliver this together. Um, and because the setup was very, I'd say welcoming. We have a chief scientist who's one of the best global marine scientists. So kind of the science side is already there. Chief economist who's also kind of changing the narrative globally around nature and the role of oceans in the global economy. Our founder, who's Her Royal Highness Princess Rima, has a very strong vision for what you said, connected health and well-being. I think that's her mantra. And I felt, it was a really good a challenge. And then to be very honest with you, Muhammad, I asked myself, would I be an imposter in this space? I've only ever worked on land.
Mhm.
And then through my time with the Dubai government, I had worked on coastal resilience, and then fish stock and circular economy, understood the connectivity between human activities on the coastline, ecosystem, marine health, and then impacts on ocean health. I'm like, okay, I'm not a complete imposter. That's important for me, right? I think a lot of people make career changes midlife. I felt it's important for me to be able to bring something to a role I'm taking as opposed to just only taking from it. So I felt, okay, I wouldn't be starting from scratch or be a complete novice. And I wasn't there as a siloed person, right? So we have a really good collaborative team. So this is what made me take on the role.
I'm glad you mentioned the piece on, this idea of what do I call imposter syndrome, right? That am I should I be here, right? Should I be representing this? But you've made a good case, not even a case, I think it's there, that all these things you've done, there is some interconnect, right? So when you're dealing with oceans, there are impacts on oceans associated with climate change, right? And you've done that piece. And then there are impacts on oceans that translate to land into urban areas, where in the region, a lot of urban areas are coast. Major urban cities are coastal, whether inland, whether sea or some other water body, um, and vice versa. So I think the reality is all of these things that we work on, whether it's an environment, whether it's in water, whether it's climate, whether it's in urban issues, agriculture, there are connective tissues between them. And
Water,
going,
right?
sorry?
Water, right, is the connective tissue. Anyway, I'm joking with
No,
you.
no, trust me, I'll take a water compliment all day. Yes, water can be a connective tissue, but what I was going to say, to your point, is that the way to transition that is organic, which I think you've done, maybe you didn't realize till later, is that you pivot based on the things that affect the new area based on some of the experiences you've done, right? Like to your point on moving to oceans, there are the impacts associated with urban planning. There are the impacts associated with climate, environmental, etc. So I think if you enter that transition using that sort of pathway, the criticism or the doubt in being an imposter will no longer be valid because you're pivoting to a new space using the knowledge or expertise from a previous area. And I think now talking to you, I think that's sort of how you've transitioned. So no imposter syndrome issues here. So I can at least report that from my end to you.
Great, thank you for the seal
Yeah.
of approval.
Not that I'm an authority on anything to
No,
be
no, no.
giving any seals of approval, but I just want
No,
to
I'm
reaffirm
joking.
what you're feeling
No, 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 yeah.
as an outside voice. Um, as we're winding down, I want to ask you one last question that's maybe a little bit more introspective. I know we've talked more on technical side and you've offered your personal insight on some of these topics we've talked about. But looking back, not to say your career is far from over, but just looking where you are, maybe not looking back, but kind of looking back, but where you are right now, what is something that almost imparting wisdom from what you've gathered? What is something that you've learned or um, sort of a piece of advice or even a source of motivation that sort of helped you navigate through your career that has gone through many different roads, right? And as you said, it's an intersection of luck and opportunity and to a certain extent desire, right? You obviously want to do the things you want to do in terms of the what do we call it? The public good or saving planet Earth or I forgot what we
Oof,
call
oof, 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 oof. Big words.
it.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Let's say following your calling. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, can you elaborate on that?
Um, I think for me, I've I know I've always been driven to if you want to have a sounds so cheesy, but like to have a positive impact, right? And the way for me to do it is through environment sustainability, right? Like that's my pathway. I'm not a doctor or a health professional, and I don't think I have the heart to be a on the ground humanitarian. I think just looking at the news is paralyzes me. So I think that's my means of action. And I think with age, sometimes you become complacent either with the opportunity you have, you're less enthusiastic to dream. And I think I'm blessed with being a bit rebellious against growing up in that sense. And no, I can still dream. I mean, yeah, I'm 40 and I can still dream. It's fine. I can still learn something new. And so and I'm happy. I'm happy with that. And I'm happy with not having a clear idea of what I'll be doing in 5 years, but I know I want to do more, right? And so I think that keeps me active in terms of learning, in terms of searching, in terms of speaking to people. I think this is why you created CWI, right, Muhammad?
I mean, yeah, to a certain extent, I think it was also a crossroad of um, an opportunity, but also a necessity. And sometimes you go the path you go because this is probably the easiest when there's no other path before you. And so you're like, okay, the only thing left is the hard thing. And so you do the hard thing, right? Whereas I guess some people just choose not, the hard thing, like it's too hard. I just won't do anything. But yeah, I agree. It's partly a calling, at least from my end, what I ended up doing, but also just I think similar to you, you went where the trajectory was leading you based on
Mm.
opportunity, based on your own personal desires and motivations, but then what was available in front of you and making lemonades out of lemon, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
is
yeah.
the reality. Just to sort of end on one of the things you said, just to really underline the point you made, I really like the comment you said about, and I'm paraphrasing here, which is being at peace with your contribution, right? I think for a lot of people, you know, it takes a village, right? It takes a team to I almost said something cheesy like teamwork makes the dream work, right? But in the sense in the sense that for all of us to contribute for the public good or for the well-being, right? Not everyone can be a doctor, right? Not everyone can be a humanitarian. Not everyone can be an engineer. But the reality is, it takes all of those and others to contribute for things to improve in all of these things we talked about in terms of the public good, the well-being of the planet, and population, all these, all these positive things. And a lot of people try to compete to be at the one spot that is the brightest, right? And some people have the talent, some people have the opportunity to be in the positions that they're in, but that does not diminish the value others bring in other areas, right? We still need other people and occupations in our society and our world to function. And some of them, to your point, you said, I like the term earlier, silent soldiers, unsung heroes, but they're still critical in the piece that they provide. And I think maybe this is sort of wisdom with age is being at peace with how you contribute. I think that's a beautiful message is that you don't have to be the brightest star as long as you're still part of the galaxy, right? And I think that that's that's
Poetic.
what makes
That's
it work.
poetic.
Thank you. Well, you inspired me with some of your earlier metaphors. Um, One last thing before we wind down. I always like to ask my guests, what are some of the things that they're currently working on, or something that's coming on the horizon, or something they recently completed that you'd like to showcase and plug and share? So maybe there's an article or a paper or an event or an accomplishment that you are in the process of or just completed or about to complete that you're comfortable sharing with the audience, just to showcase you and what you may be working on.
Ah, cool. Sales pitch. Well, I will take the opportunity to talk about the really cool ocean platform
Mm.
we're building at Wave together with my colleagues, Dom and Azza. It's going through a kind of a revamp, but it's kind of a first of its kind platform that tries to communicate the state of our ocean's health. So I will invite people to look at oceancentral.org. But we on Ocean Central, we also published a mini article about the state of ocean data and where the gaps are in terms of historical data. Um, so that's something we're working on. Anyone working on ocean data, we'd love to talk to you more. But yeah, I do want to end on the journey of building Ocean Central took us really into looking at the data that's available. And we were talking about this with my colleague Dom today. You start getting sucked into how much data is available and perfecting the data, but in reality, we know enough to know that we need to act. So it becomes a tricky situation where you know where to stop in getting data. And I think this is something that all people working in our fields, environment, water, climate change, are struggling with this balance.
One of the things, just to the term that you said in terms of data, when do you stop sort of mining for data? It's the old trap of analysis paralysis, right? Where,
Yes.
and it's a trap that, technical folks get into. It's like you get to it, you get swallowed in just data analysis versus actually using it to, drive an output or outcome. So. Jamila, always a pleasure to sit and chat with you. We could always talk forever, but I really appreciate some of the insights and sharing your experience. I think some of the things you talked about, providing some sort of behind the scenes on some of the aspects of the work you're doing is helpful. I think a lot of people that are interested in the space will look to this episode and hopefully learn some things from what you said. So thank you very much. Really enjoyed talking with you, and we'll hopefully catch up soon in person.
Likewise, Muhammad, thank you very much for the lovely discussion, the opportunity, and always a pleasure.